see a couple of people that are unfamiliar. We already did our business meeting, so we're going to push right forward into our planned presentation. And as most of you know, Carolyn Walter is going to lead us today. We're going to focus on understanding the pain and growth opportunities inherent in a variety of loss events and both planning, and we're also going to discuss grief and recovery from loss and magical moments, as well as opportunities to make out of loss. Carolyn is an educator and adjunct professor at University of Pennsylvania. She's been involved in the specialty of grief, loss, and restoration issues for more than 20 years and is the co-author of Grief and Loss Across Lifetime, a psychosocial approach, which is now available in a third edition. And she also published Loss of a Life Partner in 2003 and Breast Cancer Through Life Course, Women's Experiences in 1991. She's a member of our Philadelphia chapter, and I think we're all about to participate in a program that those of us who've worked on it have been moved by the very meetings that we've had just to discuss. So I have no doubt this is going to be a very deep and enriching conversation. And so thank you. And Carolyn, take it away. And
I first wanted to just say to anyone who's in Florida, I don't know if there's anyone on this call, but I just wanted to send out my support and hope that you are safe and that your houses are safe. Since this is a topic of loss, my goodness, look at all the people that have lost in the last 24 hours. Look at how much they've lost. Makes me tear up to think about it. And I do want to thank our team. I'm so happy to be working with the team. Usually when I do a presentation, I just kind of do it myself. And this was really a learning experience for me. And also I learned from everybody on the team a little new thing that I hadn't thought of. So I've tried to put that into the talk today. And we'll have 3 people speaking about their incredible experiences with loss, and that will sort of help flesh out some of the things I'm going to say. And I've never had a chance to do that other than when I write books and I interview people and their words come to me. I use some of that in my presentations, but this is really live. And 3 people have offered to do this. And so I thank them for that. And also to our leader, Bruce, for his creativity and ability to lead us and doing something very different. And I think the Monday edition will be just so enriching following this. So thank you, Bruce, for all the work that you do for this organization and for many of the things you do. Okay, so I just want to start by saying that we're going to talk about loss and grief and healing and meaning making, and finally how that all leads to growth. And some of you know this is true from your lives. You can probably say it just as clearly as I can. But I wanted to just start with the fact that if you think about the last 2.5 years, what this world has been through with the pandemic, you don't even have to go any further in terms of the losses that people have experienced. And I think one of the biggest is this loss of the world that we once knew. It's a huge loss of safety. And safety is an ideal. It's something that we kind of like to have, but we know that it's not real, but somehow the pandemic shot that to the kilt. And I think, if we just can keep that in mind in terms of our own tension and our own anxiety, it's always there for me. And when people tell me that they just finished a sequence of 2 weeks with the virus, like Bruce has, it's just there again. So I think we need to think about that. Coupled with that is the war in Ukraine. Can't forget it. It's in our faces every single day, and all the losses that we feel about that for them. And, I think it was NBC reported back in the late spring that 70% of the population was experiencing extreme anxiety, and that same number are worried about a nuclear attack. And so even though we may not think about it all the time, the news brings it up pretty regularly that Putin is thinking about it all the time. And a lot of these things about loss aren't things we consciously think about. We try to sort of do our daily stuff and not dip into all that, but it's hard not to. So I wanted to start before we get into the PowerPoint by sort of framing it that way, because I think it really helps us all to be grounded in what we're doing. Okay, so I think we can put up the first slide, Bruce. So, I mean, loss is universal, we know that. And it's really when we're deprived of something that we care about it, or being without something we've had and that we valued. We can also think about it as a disruption in a connection or an attachment. Some of you may have studied John Bowlby like I did. I'm older than many of you, but he wrote wonderful things about attachment and loss. And he was really the father of all this in many ways. And I will refer to him another time. But we know that it's a disruption. You know, we've been connected to something that we've cared about, loved, and now we have this disruption. I want to read you a quote, I almost forgot, from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I think everyone in the room probably knows of her. She was really the mother of dealing with grief and loss at all in our culture. She wrote the first book on death and dying in the 60s, I think. And she says, you will heal and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same. Nor should you be the same, nor would you want to. And I hope that my talk helps you see that that's all quite true from people that I've interviewed and from your own experiences. So we're going to be, you know, constantly talking about how loss can lead to growth and change in our lives. Every one of us, this is a quote from Haruki Murakami that I love. Every one of us is losing something precious to us. Lost opportunities, lost possibilities, feelings we can never get back again. That's part of what it means to be alive. And so that's that growth piece, you know, that we have this loss, but then we have this opportunity to grow and change. So now what I thought, if you could share examples of behaviors, thoughts, and feelings that you think accompany a loss that you've experienced, and we'll put those up in the chat, just so people can see the range that people have experienced in terms of feelings, thoughts, fears, the first one that goes up, great. Numbness, yes. Anxiety, wow. Keep going. What else? What are some other things people feel? Deep sadness, absolutely, twice. Anger, and that often doesn't get out there fast, but that's a big one. And grief, absolutely. What about disorientation? I'm going to throw that up. We feel disoriented. Helplessness, overwhelmed, unfair, unfair, big time. Sometimes we don't want to admit that, but that's a big piece of it. But it's a real disruption to us. Guilt, big time, Thelma, thank you. And we'll be talking about that later. So you've already put up a lot. Cheated, very important. Emptiness, love it. Oh yeah, I can relate to that. The emptiness that we feel when we're going through this, which is so unsettling. And I guess all this stuff is unsettling. So the upside, though, of all this is that most adults, not all of us, I mean, I had a lot of help when my first husband died, so I didn't do it by myself. I don't think anybody does it by themselves, but most of us can make it through a trauma and come out on the other side. But I think the people that do have been able to use their support systems and perhaps some therapy to be able to come out on the other side. Not always, but I think for the most part, we can say that. Okay, here we're looking at the different types of losses. Oh, relief. Thank you, Kendall. I do want to say yes. Yes, Kendall, that's really true. And I think if someone's been in a situation where they've been caregiving for a long, long time or dealing with the stressor, they can feel relief at the end of when someone actually leaves their life, or relief about some other losses too. Thank you. So the loss of a significant person is the one everyone thinks about. You know, death, divorce, separation, missing person. Any other things you want to, you could throw something up on that one too. Is there any other, who else do we want to talk about? What kind of losses? Loss of a pet. Thank you, Connie. Absolutely. Very critical. So many people are connected to pets in this society. And now I live in a building where I would say 80% of the people have dogs here. So loss of social ties. Absolutely. I mean, I only put up a few, and so I'm glad you're able to flesh that out some. A dream. And yes, loss of family connection. So now you're talking about some ideals, some dreams, some values, some goals. What about health? Somebody just put it up. Huge, right? Especially in my generation, people are really struggling. I'm 77, and so, you know, a lot of friends, my husband of late has been struggling with health issues. I've been struggling with some things. Memory, thank you. Independence, big time, right? Home, home in so many different ways. Home, you know, it's not maybe that you've moved away, but you've had to shift something about what you view as home. So that's a biggie. And we do want to include retirement here too. A couple of people on the call. Status. Oh, Thelma, absolutely, big time. And of course, the final one is one I alluded to when we were talking about Florida, the loss of external objects. Seeing those cars just underwater, people's cars are gone. You know, how are they going to get from one place to another? And many people can't afford to buy another car. So, and houses, I mean, destroyed, destruction. So the external object thing is huge right now with this horrible hurricane that's hit Florida. Okay, so now we're going to do a breakout room, and Bruce is going to put up on the screen loss of country. I love it. Immigration party. The instructions, and I'll read them to you too. Are they already up?
Yes, if you scroll up on the chat, you'll see worksheet 1 in class exercise. It's there in a couple of places. You can download it right above it, or you can just read or copy it there, but it's in the chat.
So everyone has some paper and pencil handy that you will need. And basically, I call this a lost lifeline. I kind of made it up when our chapter was doing something with Penn State, and it works well for everyone. So I decided to use it for you all too. But basically, on the paper, you just want to draw a horizontal line, and at one end is your birth year, and at the other end is now, September, still September, right? Yeah, 2022. And then just mark significant losses that you've experienced, you know, kind of the year maybe that it occurred, and just like divorce and just the year, so that you know about when that was in your lifetime. And people have been pretty amazed to see the kinds of things that pop up for them over their lifetime. So then just put those vertical lines somewhere, and then just stick the year above it and maybe what it was. You don't have to describe it, just say what it was. And please include pertinent losses, pandemic losses, if they're pertinent to you. And then after you do that, so take some time to do that. We're not going to break out quite yet. So just for a few moments, choose one or two of your losses and consider how you coped with those losses. How did you deal with them? And once you've done that, we're going to put you into your breakout rooms. And the instructions for those, I guess, I don't want to confuse everybody, but what's easier, if I read you the instructions before you go into your breakout, for the breakout? They'll be up in the chat, but If you're still trying to think about it, I don't want to confuse, but with your small group, I want you to talk about your losses and how you coped with them and what was helpful and what wasn't helpful about your own strategies, if you can do that. And I think in a small group, you can do that quite well and get some thoughts from some other people, which is the whole idea about around this breakout. And then who in your network or what was helpful to you in coping with your loss? Why? Was there help that you wish you'd had that you didn't receive? Which is a new twist that I've added for this group that I didn't think about for our intergenerational course. But I think it's important for people to be able to identify what they didn't receive. So does that seem pretty clear? Okay. So Bruce, do you want to
I'll punch
Go ahead.
out the breakout room
and have fun? So, I mean, the first in bold, it's a normal reaction to loss. And it's a normal part of the healing process. It's the first part of it. You can't really heal unless you go through this painful, messy, debilitating experience. And it's a really, really tough time for most people. And I think we're so frightened oftentimes by the feelings that we have that are so intense. And we're also frightened because things are out of our control. And we know that, but we really don't. I mean, there are times, and this is just such a reminder that life, that we can't control what happens. These things happen to us, and we have not done anything to cause them necessarily. We can feel unspeakable feelings and be so afraid of voicing them. And I know anger is one that people have trouble with because if they've lost a loved one, particularly, they're furious that person isn't in their life anymore, but they don't think they have a right to feel angry at them. How could I feel angry? I know I felt that in the beginning with my grief journey. And, by 6 months to 7 months, boy, I was spewing forth anger, thank God. And I think it's the only way you can heal is to sort of go around to that part of it. I want to read you a quote from Vicki Harrison about grief because it speaks to me and I think it will to you. Grief is like the ocean. It comes on waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm and sometimes it's overwhelming. All we can do is learn to swim. And I just think that's so appropriate for grief. I love that one.
Who was that, Carol?
It was Vicki Harrison. And a friend of mine just sent me the quote, about 2 months ago. He knew I was going to be doing some of this work. And I don't know where it comes from, but if you look up Vicki Harrison, she's an author of something, you'll be able to find it. If not, I'll try to bug my friend about it. Okay, so, and Anne, let's see, who is she? Anne Rolfe has said, grief is in 2 parts. The first is loss, the second is life. And so again, we have to go through this mess and then we start to feel like we can live again. So I think at this point, I'd like to have Paula share her story about her loss, or not her story, but a piece of her story that I know will be meaningful to all of you. So Paula, would you introduce yourself and go with
Sure.
that?
Paula Usry. I'm down in Southern Oregon right now. And just very briefly, I retired at the end of the end of 2018 from teaching. And I did what Lisa did, and I became a certified professional retirement coach. That's what I planned on doing, working part-time. But 2 months after I retired, my husband started experiencing some very serious health issues. I kept telling myself they would get better. And, I tried to be supportive. Sometimes I found myself as a part-time caregiver, other times full-time, around the clock. And then about 1.5 years later, he had a very critical incident, was life-flighted to another hospital. We thought we were going to lose him, but he came back again for another 1.5 years. And 4 months ago, he had 2 heart attacks. The second one was fatal. And as the person who was doing the caregiving, I had a lot of mixed feelings when I was caregiving. Sometimes it was so exhausting. I thought, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Other times I was thankful that we had that time. But after he passed, I struggled with a lot of blame and guilt, which we've talked about. And I felt, what could I have done that I didn't do? Who should I have talked to? Should I have gone to more doctor's appointments? And then I got a few comments from some well-meaning family members. Did you do this? Did you do that? And so I had a lot of nights where I tormented myself because of all that I didn't do that I could have done. And I finally realized, no, I didn't know. I'm not a doctor. I did my best. And I think part of that might be a gendered issue as well, because a lot of women end up being caregivers. I know men do too, but I think there's an assumption, an expectation as a woman that you have a certain kind of responsibility as the caregiver to make sure everything is okay. And so I kind of worked through that blame. That's where I am right now. And I'm trying to learn from this whole experience.
Thank you so much, Paula, because that's something that so many people have trouble with. And truly, I've been there. I know that. And we have to forgive ourselves, for whatever happened. It's so important in the grieving process at some point. There are a lot of research that's been done on parents who've lost kids. And when they learn to self-forgive is when they learn to heal. When they learn, because it's very hard as a parent not to protect your child and to feel that you're not responsible. So that's where the research, I think it's going on in a lot of other ways now, but it started with parents of children. So what you said is meaningful to everyone in this room. I know, and thank you from my heart to yours. I don't want to leave this without saying that grief is so individual. And I was reminded of this when we had our team meeting. Everybody grieves in their own way. And the thing that you have to learn to do is to trust yourself, and that the way you're grieving is okay for you. People will try to say things to you. And I remember in my support group that I was in for a year after the loss of my first husband when I was 48, there were 3 of us who left the group around the same time. We felt like our lives were moving forward. And she asked us what we remembered about what she said. And we all said to trust ourselves, to do what we thought was right, and to feel and to think what we needed to feel and think. And every one of us said the same thing. So I say that to you because it's something I've learned, and I believe it's really important to keep in our minds. Okay, so we'll move quickly through this one. Not that we need to, but we do time-wise. In our culture, we make it hard to talk about grief. I mean, it's easier than it used to be. Maybe in some ways, schools have set up support groups for kids. If someone commits suicide, there's a group mostly set up for them. But by and large, it's not all that easy to access things in our culture. Some cultures have criers. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I forget, I think it's in Africa maybe, where they send a crier in to the family when they lose someone in the family, and they just have this person start weeping. So it's interesting because we certainly don't do that. But we do have ways, certainly with support groups, I know Kendall and excuse me, Lisa are going to work with you on Monday with writing and with some art that you're going to do, art therapy. Those are wonderful ways to sort of express some of these feelings, along with therapy, along with meditation, which is critical for many people. But I do think the support groups are really helpful because they're people who are going through it at the same time. So if you can access something like that in your community, it's really a valuable experience. And I think we have to be careful not to, we don't want to be in pain, right? So it's seductive to try and get out of it. But I think if we don't go through it, we're not going to get to the other side. And they're only lessons that we'll learn when we have to go through. So the last piece I've already talked about, we can move on to the next slide. I grew up, in graduate school and all that stuff, learning that separation was the big thing you do when you lose somebody. You got to separate from that experience. You got to forget about it. You're going to get better if you just let it go. No. The research coming out in the late 90s was so different. And that's really what propelled me into some of the work that I started doing because it resonated with me, that this whole idea that the loss of a life, a job, a home doesn't mean the loss of a relationship with that person, pet, job, or ideal. It just means that physical loss is not here, but we continue our bonds with this loved person or pet or whoever. And this helps us promote, this helps us heal. It soothes us to have these memories, these photographs. When I was interviewing for the Loss of a Life Partner book, it was amazing how many people had photographs of their loved ones up on the wall and took me on tour of their house to show me all the pictures they had collected. And really interesting, the partners whose loved ones had dogs at the time, they sat with their dog during the interview because this is the first time they talked about all this with anyone. And so this dog was there giving them a sense of support. And I didn't really notice that till I started thinking about it at the end, how many dogs were with me in the room because I did these interviews in person. And other ways people do it, memorabilia. One family I know lost their dad, and so all of them got t-shirts with their dad's name on it. So one of the questions, and these are for you to think about later, what are particular ways you'd like to keep the memory of your loss alive? And Sheila is going to share her story about how some connections have helped her.
I'm Sheila. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was January of this year that my husband died. He had had pancreatic cancer for 3 years. Every day we tried to live life to the fullest. So I had him work with me to create a house manual. And that included everything from how to change a filter in the furnace to how to do our taxes. And it's something that connected us, and it still connects us. So, and he's helping me still. Every morning, right after he died, for the longest time, I'd wake up and I'd say to myself, do I want to find joy today or be bitter? And I always chose joy. And I had him in my heart every day, and I had a relationship with him. I'd talk to him and I'd ask him questions. And one time I was looking all over for something. I just couldn't find it. It was driving me crazy. And finally I said, David, what did you do with that? And I swear it was like literally 2 seconds and it like appeared. I mean, it was right there. And I told my son, and he said, oh, that's just a coincidence. You know, he didn't believe in that sort of thing. So a few months later, we were going on a family trip, and we always would take the walkie-talkies. Each car would have a walkie-talkie. And I found one of them, but I couldn't find the other one. And so my son said, well, I'll come over and I'll look. And he looked, he couldn't find it. He came back right before we left town, and he said, one more shot, I'll look again. And he came up and he had it in his hand. I'm like, oh my God, where did you find that? That's incredible. And he said, well, I said, Daddy, what did you do with the walkie-talkie? And he looked over right after that, and there was a fanny pack. He opened it up, and it was the walkie-talkie. I mean, it was crazy. I guess he became a believer. I don't know. So anyway, so the last part that I'll tell you about is a 4-leaf clover story. And my husband had a real knack for finding 4-leaf clovers. I mean, you could be outside with them in the grass, and all of a sudden he would just look down, pick it up, and found a 4-leaf clover. And he'd bring it in, put it in a little vase. And when it was time, he'd put it in wax paper and put it under a book. And after that, I never knew what happened to it. So it was, I don't know, after he died, and my son came over and was helping upstairs go through some things. And I decided to go downstairs and maybe tackle just one shelf in David's office. And it was above eye level. So I got the stuff cleaned off, and then I took a rag and I knew something was there. And so I stopped, and it was wax paper and a 4-leaf clover. I picked it up and I brought it and I put it in the kitchen, and I put it on the higher part of the counter and pushed it back to keep it safe. And we would kind of like walk past and admire it, it was special. So anyway, was a friend, and she had asked me, she said, has David sent you a sign that he's okay? And it's actually a sister-in-law of one of my best friends. And I'm like, no, I haven't asked. And she, you need to ask. And so she called me one morning and she said, did you ask yet? And I said, no, but Vicki, I'll go ahead, I'll ask. So I remember exactly where I was. And I said out loud that morning, and I said, David, send me a sign that you're okay, that you can do it in your own time frame. I'm not pushing you, just whatever, whenever. And I just let it go. And that same day, I was having 3 girlfriends over for lunch. And as we were leaving, they were going out the door. One stopped and saw the 4-leaf clover sitting on the high counter. And we went on, walked out, and I walked back in and took 1 step into the kitchen, and the wax paper and 4-leaf clover was at my foot.
Oh, wow.
I was like, what? Wait, it must have been the wind. It's a breeze. And I'm like, no, there's no window open. There's nothing. And I'm like, and I was like, and just stood there for a couple of seconds. I'm like, oh, David, thank you. So
Oh, my.
don't know how to explain it, except it was certainly a wonder moment.
And those wonder moments are a way of connecting you with David. So it
And there were others.
some chills. Thank you so much, Sheila, for, I know several people were nodding right with you when you were speaking. We
And
thank you.
And I'll just jump in for a second. This idea for this meeting actually began when Sheila and I and some others were on a call, and we began talking about these kind of wonder moments that no one ever shares. But and Sheila shared her story, and then everybody else who was on the call, there were 4 or 5 of us, told their stories of these kind of miracle moments that we keep inside ourselves. So
Right. But it's wonderful to share them. It really is. And there's so much, there's research to back up the whole thing about talking to your spouse after they die. Bowlby did a study and he found out the women who were talking to their spouses did so much better, after that first year, because they had connected with this is a long time ago. So it's really, this is a wonder moment. Thank you, Sheila, for everything. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we'll move forward and we'll try to move through. I know we're going to run out of time and I want to make sure we get to meaning making because we have another story that goes with that. So this whole dual process model, it's a little more academic, but it's the thing that my clients have loved it when I've given them this little diagram to look at. So Bruce, why don't you flip to the diagram that's right next to that, because it's a little easier maybe to see it. So what happens when we're grieving? We're going through 2 different sort of incompatible things at the same time. We're dealing with the grief work, we're dealing with the sadness, we're dealing with being immersed in all the stuff we're feeling to work it through. But soon we begin to maybe laugh once after about a couple of weeks. And that's our sort of entrance into the new world. And it's sort of a way for us to distract ourselves a little from that awful grief process that feels so difficult. And a lot of people have told me they feel a little bit crazy when they're grieving and when they talk about it, it's because they're moving. They'll see themselves in the grief world, maybe in the morning, and by the afternoon, they may be off with a friend and they've forgotten about their grief for a bit. But that's a way of saving ourselves. We can't be in it all the time. And so it's wonderful if we can be refreshed with these moments of feeling good. And it's so hard because at first you feel so guilty that you've allowed yourself, some people do, I won't say everyone, but it's pretty common, that when you are having these moments of fun, how can I be doing that when I just lost somebody in my life 2 days ago? But that happens and it's okay. And if there's nothing else you get from me today, it's normalizing a lot of things that are going on in your minds and your hearts about grief. So often people think, there's something wrong with me, but really not. You're okay, because grief is so hard. And our psyches have set up a way for us to take a break. like moving into this fancy term restoration oriented, but it really means moving into that place where you're distracted. And when we avoid one or the other, then we sort of get ourselves stuck. And so we use this a lot with clients who are stuck in a certain place, and we can help move them into the other place, because you can get stuck in this world, this new world. You can be very, very busy in your world and not be doing any of the grief work. And I think I was that way when I first started. And it wasn't until I could stop with the busyness and say, this is, I got to work on this. And the same is true with, you have to move out of that grief world at times to start a new life, and also to get some distraction from the pain. So I don't know if that makes sense to any of you, but it has made sense to my students. It's made sense to my clients and to me as I continue to learn and grow with this process. So I think we'll let that go and move on to the next slide, which is the identity and meaning making, which someone had brought up earlier, because our sense of self really does take a hit when we go through something like this. And thinking about identity, it's very fluid. So when you go through some kind of a loss, and you all are coaches, reinvention coaches, this is great stuff for you. I mean, this is like what you do. You help people move from that one sense of identity into a new sense of identity, a new sense of who they are. And similar to the continuing bonds we talked about, I use my hands because I'm so used to teaching in person. So you see me flying like this because I feel like I've got you in the room. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the continuing bonds, because when you move into a new phase, you're taking some of your old self with you. I mean, I certainly did that when I left academia. I was ready to leave, but I wasn't ready to leave myself as a teacher. I just began finding other ways to learn to do that. So I really think this whole identity piece is real important. And for all of you to try and understand the ways in which this loss has changed you. How have I changed since losing my friend, my spouse, my pet, my parent, my job, my money? And how have I changed since the pandemic began? Lots of you may have already worked on that. In almost every group I was in, one of the tasks was to do that work, to figure out who we were now. And we're different. We have to be different. The pandemic, laid it all out there for us. What a learning experience, and it's still going on. And you're all talking about whether you want to get back in person or not. That's, like, how far into the real world do I want to go? Just like this back and forth, how much do I want to move out into the world? I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. I need to stay over here. So I'll move us forward quickly because I really want to get to the meaning making, because I want to give Barb a chance to share her wonderful story. So, loss is an assault on our system and our assumptions. What we believe about the world kind of is shattered by a major loss. I talked about the safety piece. If we have a serious illness where our bodies have betrayed us, how can they do that? So, oops, went too far. We really struggle when we go through a loss to try to find some meaning, make some sense out of it. It's that simple, really. And how did that get up there? Nietzsche, not right. That's supposed to be Frankel. Oh dear, cross it out. A person who has a why to live can find a how to survive. Viktor Frankel in his book. And I think it's an amazing comment. And Kessler picks that up in his books, which will be at the end in the chat. Loss is simply what happens to you. Meaning is what you make happen. So we can shape that meaning, and we can attach to our story through our thoughts, as well as the story we tell others. Someone earlier mentioned stories, and stories need to change as we change and grow through our losses. And this is one of the ways we look at it. And I want to give Barbara Shaman a chance to talk about how she made meaning from an incredible loss that she went through. Barbara?
Sure. Well, thank you. That you quoted Viktor Frankl really touches me deeply, because my mother was also a Holocaust survivor. And she taught me about the importance of resilience, and no matter what life brings you, you can rise above it. You can find meaning. And I think that was the cornerstone of how I had to deal with the loss of since 2008, my father, then 2 months later, my husband, a year later, my mother, then 3 years later, my stepdaughter, and 5 years ago, my son. And that was a particularly very difficult time in my life. I've actually never spoken about this publicly before. But I used to think, you know what, I'll push through this. I'm strong. I'll get to the other side. And then I realized there is not another side. I'm not going to push through this, but I wanted to honor and remember the people I lost and to celebrate who they were and do something meaningful in their memory. I knew I had to move forward in spite of the grief that I had. And so with each loss, I was looking for something that I could do that could really make meaning out of that loss. When my father died, I had started writing a family memoir called Live Your Legacy Now. And when he died, I thought I would drop that project entirely. And my husband urged me to keep writing. He told me the book would be a gift to my family and to others. But unfortunately, tragically, my husband died 2 months after my father. And I kept writing during my husband's illness, not in the hospital and not when he was in hospice, but he made me feel that this was a positive way of dealing with what was going on in my life. I continued writing through my mother's battle with dementia, and I would read excerpts of the book to her. I didn't know what she understood or if she even heard what I was saying, but she kept on smiling every time I spoke and read to her. That smile kept me going. But the most difficult loss that I've endured was when my son died. He had edited my books and the book was already published. My son was an extraordinary journalist for the Jerusalem Post. He lived in Israel. He was brilliant. He was sensitive. He was an extraordinary writer. The last articles he wrote before his death were about the Sudanese immigrants who were being deported in Israel. He knew some of them and took a strong stance in the articles he wrote, protesting their deportation. Every day, Dan would call me and share his daily article. That call was a highlight of my day. I struggled after his death to find something meaningful to do in his memory. I was running a not-for-profit that I had started in 1995 called Champions of Caring to promote social activism amongst Philadelphia high school youth. My son loved this organization, so I decided to start a new chapter called Dan's Champions and work with DACA students and immigrants who were in Kensington High School, which is in a very low-income area, which is drug-infested and very dangerous. I wanted to bring resources to these students, and I began searching for community partners who could help me. I felt Dan's presence every step of the way. I approached Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania, and they provided medical service. Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society provided legal and immigration services. We went to an organization called La Puerta Abierta, who provided counseling services in Spanish, all pro bono. One of the top chefs in Philadelphia, Mark Vetri, had his food truck come to the school and teach these young people how to cook healthy meals. The Philly Pops provided hundreds of tickets to their Christmas shows, and students at Drexel University School of Entrepreneurship became mentors to these young students. I knew this was a miracle. These things were happening to me, for me and to me in such strange ways. I felt that Dan was with me every step of the way. Each time a partnership was created, I knew he was at my side. I saw multiple rainbows and even double rainbows throughout the years and continue to do so. I just saw one recently, a double rainbow. So I met many of these new partners at social events or while sitting on a bus going to New York City. I met a medical director of a clinic that worked with us. So I faced each day with gratitude and appreciation. I remember my mom's incredible resilience. I choose to live the life my loved ones inspired me to live, and to feel gratitude for the gift of life. May their memories be a blessing.
Oh, thank you, Barbara. My goodness, how could we? Ah, incredible. I wanted to add that you all are part of how I make meaning from the loss of my first husband many years ago, 30 years ago, by talking to other people. And this morning I have his big picture in my office, and I was talking to him this morning, and he said, "You're going to do great. Just go do it." So thank you for being part of it. I just want to do the last slide because I think it's really important for us to think about finding benefit, which really has to do with recognizing some positive changes that have taken place in your life after. This isn't something you do right away, but down the road, people really begin to see things. And I have to share with you, when we wrote the breast cancer book, I did most of the interviewing. My colleague did some other things. And every one of the breast cancer patients aged 21 to 89 said to me, and I was younger then, I didn't get it. They said, "You know, I'm not glad I had breast cancer, but I'm glad I have my life the way it is now. You know, I've learned to take care of myself. I put myself up there with my family. I'm not down here anymore." Every single one of them. And I was so struck by that because to me, I mean, and most of these women lost breasts because in those days they weren't doing lumpectomies. So I took that to heart. And then when I did the Loss of a Life Partner book, the same thing emerged. People would say, "I've learned to make each day count. My days are better. I'm more empathic. I know I am." Would bring out these positive pieces about themselves that they could see that grew from their losses. And I didn't want to leave today without ending with that note because it's an incredible experience. And all of you, I'm sure, will be able to find those positive pieces in yourself as you move forward from whatever losses you've experienced. So I thank you. I don't have any more to say. I'm going to end it, and accept the takeaway lessons, which you can take with you. All change involves loss, which is often unrecognized. Loss and transition lead us to growth and transformation. If you're able to make some meaning, grievers typically learn lessons of empathy. Many of the people told me this. I am so much more empathic now. And resilience. They learn that they can survive incredible pain, if nothing else. And a grief due to death and other loss need not be feared, but sharing the experience helps make it a lot more tolerable. And I think that's one of the biggies. So I thank you for your attention and your contributions to the team, for your contributions. And I so look forward to Monday. And I think you're going to talk more about that, Bruce. What's happening on Monday?
I can take that if you want. So Kendall and I have a little bit of what we call using a little bit of writing and art to let you express some of your feelings. And it doesn't mean that you're going to have to draw so that other people recognize it. It's something for yourself. So what we'd like you to do if you're going to join us is have three pieces of blank paper, two writing utensils, two different pens or two different markers, it doesn't matter. And if you want to have a magazine with you, that would be helpful. Otherwise, we will supply you with some pictures to do a little exercise with. And is that it, Kendall? Would you cover everything? Yes?
So, well, I'm going to suggest that people consider creating a visible library of images. And these images, as Carolyn talked about, this image of being at sea and realizing that being at sea, one needed to swim. And by analogy, what are some of the images that sort of reflect what grief feels like for us? And are there some lessons from those images that will help us move through that grief, such as learning to swim? And what would learning to swim be? How would you play that out if you were to take that as a message for yourself? So I think it's going to be a really an interesting, and just given the people here and the conversations that will come from this, I would love it if you all could come and experiment with us, what it might be like.
I just want to thank Carolyn for her wonderful presentation and the extremely work that she did to this. And she didn't say this, but while this has been going on and she's been preparing, she's been going through crisis with her husband, who's fortunately home as of 2 days ago from the hospital. So she did this despite all that was going on. And I want to thank each of the panelists too, and each of you for sharing of yourselves today. So this is what makes Life Planning Network what it is. So thank you.